Many world environmentalists have concluded that with the continuance of business as usual strategy is the pathway to global disasters. Even today, the strict climate policies and Paris agreements has been in place to lessen the emissions for the greenhouse intensive sectors such as the oil and gas. However, the demands for oil and gas is still going to be peak in 2030. Considering the oil and gas sectors are significant emissions contributor, they are also standing at the forefront for energy transitions. Here's a profound Malaysia oil and gas company who is forefronting the energy transition pathway. Yinson Holding. Yinson specializes in floating production, storage and offloading vessel, in short FPSO vessel, that designed to receive, process and store hydrocarbons before offloading them. And besides oil and gas, Yinson is also actively expanding its business towards renewable energy productions. Both subsidiaries of Yinson, Yinson Renewables and Yinson Green Tech, are established to offset Yinson core oil and gas business and the most carbon intensive business sectors, the Yinson production. Yinson is also proactively improving its operational management to an ESG integrated operations. However, there is one significant challenge in Yinson's supply chain management. Despite having low emissions across its scope 1 and 2, Yinson production scope 3, particularly the category 13, downstream lease assets are dominating over 98% of Yinson Group's total greenhouse gas emissions, and this comprises more than 2 million tons of CO2 equivalent. And why is this so critical? As Yinson are committed to achieve its climate goal of carbon neutrality by 2030 and net zero by 2050, without taking these scope 3 emissions into considerations, we are uncertain its achievability. And understanding category 13 is important for lessors, who retain responsibility for the environmental performance of their lease assets even when it's used by others. And particularly when the lessee operations are energy intensive or the lease agreements are long term, if the lessor not conscious with the offshore productions of the lessee, it will cause major bottlenecks to progress towards the net zero. And although specific regulations for category 13 remains limited, there are several international mandates are encouraging disclosure of material scope 3 emissions, including the SBT, science-based targets. It requires companies to set scope 3 targets. And second is the EU CSRD. They call for full scope 3 emission reporting, which requires transparency where materials being used. And lastly is the IFRS sustainability standards. It emphasizes a complete value chain transparency. Before we delve deeper into the sustainability challenges, there are some terms that I want to use back and forth to avoid confusions. So when I mention lessor or owners, I'm referring to Yinson, the company who is providing the FPSO. And when I mention lessee or client, I'm referring to the lease operator, which is usually a oil company that leases the FPSO from Yinson. Now let's move on to the sustainability challenges based on IFRS S1 and S2. So for the governance, the identified issue is Yinson has established a robust framework for assessing the upstream players such as the suppliers and partners by incorporating materiality and ESG screening. However, there were no governance framework that to be extended within the contractual agreements with the lease operator and Yinson. Therefore, Yinson should embed standardized and best practice governance criteria into its contractual agreements with the lease operator. This includes integrating the due diligence principles on the environmental and social aspects, in particular the FPSO productions operations. Right, now for the strategy, the identified issue is given Yinson commitment to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030 and net zero by 2050, addressing only scope 1 and 2 through optimizing internal operations and set up renewable subsidiary is insufficient, especially overlooking the 98% of client cost emissions will bring bad reputational and potential catastrophic environmental impact. Therefore, Yinson should strengthen their net zero roadmap, not only improve internal operations but catalyzing systematic change across its value chain. And the new approach should be aligned with the key principle from the UNEP financial institutions, climate target settings for banks, especially setting a scenario-based intermediate targets for 2030. And firstly, transitions to all operational and attributable greenhouse gas emissions approach. Emission targets should be informed by the latest climate science, including IPCC findings. Targets should also be committed, reviewed, and revised at least every 5 years. And furthermore, Scope 3 emissions should encompass their clients' Scope 1, 2, and 3, particularly in the lease operations and the finance activities. So the identified issue in the risk management is Yinson did not provide a contextualized detail regarding to the measurement of its Scope 3 emissions from its lease operator project, specifically targeting on the category 13. Therefore, Yinson should establish a clear ambitions for its lease operator to take part in the energy transitions policy. And these include a defined, credible, and publicly available plan to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions across the value chain. The first key step is encouraging the client to begin collecting Scope 1, 2, and 3 emission data. Yinson should also provide a detailed guidance based on the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Scope 3 standards, as well as supplementary technical guidance for calculating the Scope 3 emissions to ensure consistency and transparency in emissions accounting. And for the metrics and targets, the identified issue is Yinson has not established an annual absolutes and intensity target for the Scope 3 emissions. Therefore, both Yinson and lease operators should integrate a key performance indicator into the lease agreements. This includes charting out realistic and measurable performance target for reducing emissions, embedding contract-bound incentive to achieve enhanced environmental outcomes, and such approach ensures that emissions reductions will become a shared responsibilities and drives accountability across the value chain. Now let's move on to the sustainability concepts that can be employed for Yinson current situations. Firstly, it will be the lean management. And the fundamental philosophy of lean management is waste eliminations in all form. The lean thinking focuses on identifying and removing the process waste to enable the continuous improvement. And these include defects, overproductions, waiting, not utilizing people's talent, transportations, inventory, motions, and overprocessing. And these processes are associated in the context of offshore oil and gas activities. For example, among all, waiting is one of the most frequent happening process waste in offshore activities, where there could be waiting on delays in receiving orders or approvals, waiting for service company personnel or rental equipment, and mud conditioning, and also waiting on weather to operate. Therefore, lean management can be a proposed strategy for Yinson and its clients. For its clients, the oil and gas companies, the maintenance efficiency is always on the top priority due to the impact of production uptime and safety. However, the continuous nature of process industry makes shutdown extremely costly. Therefore, Yinson as an FPSO provider, they can play a proactive role by collaborating with the lease operator by giving a lean management support, from supporting the project management and planning to shifting the attentions from maintenance improvement from the technical matters to the management side. And this focuses on eliminating the root cause of the problems through team-based collaborations and implementations. And overall, this lean thinking enable the operator to reduce downtime, increase asset utilizations, and minimize resource waste. And the second sustainability concept can be applied is Kanban, a Japanese term meaning visual workflow systems. As the oil and gas offshore sector is a risky business operating in an extreme environment, and the nature of the product, hydrocarbons needs extra cautions in explorations, handling, and transportations. Therefore, an offshore oil platform with Kanban is effective solutions for improving collaborations. This is a perfect tool for Yinson to facilitate compliance with environmental regulations, mainly helping to track the client's compliance efforts, streamlining the process of meeting environmental standards, whether it's submitting reports, conducting inspections, or maintaining equipments. Both Yinson and client can see which tasks are pending and overdue. Therefore, it creates a sense of responsibility and urgency. And the final important lever for reducing downstream emissions is client engagements. Companies can engage in various ways, either directly or indirectly through educations, collaborations, or incentive, or indirectly through corporate policies or igniting customer motivations via marketing strategy and choice architecture. These methods include provide tailored informations, giving feedback to client, encouraging commitment making and goal setting, and also recruiting leaders from within social networks and using variety of social influence strategies. And now, in Yinson case, setting customer engagement target can get its client commit in moving towards a specific course of actions. For example, making the client to set greenhouse gas reduction target themselves. In essence, this kind of greenhouse gas reduction targets can be met through engaging in a low carbon project, sustainability programs, or other activities that reduce emissions. And ultimately, efforts on multiple fronts can create this virtuous cycle where every company is actively working to reduce their emissions and within their value chain. And now for the beneficiaries, there's Yinson. When they drive towards this transformative goal change, this gave them the competitive edge that attracts investors and funders to participate in their future FPSO projects. Yinson will also achieve a strong client relationship by helping clients to reduce emissions. This adds a strategic value where client would like to have a long-term partnership rather than just a service provider. Yinson will also improve overall sustainability performance, particularly the Scope 3 emissions. And now, the client will also benefit, as Yinson will ease their progress towards net zero targets through adhering a high-level environmental and competent policies and guidelines. This partnership will also likely to create a ripple effect, contributing a regulatory preparedness for its clients to adapt the evolving environmental regulations. And they will also be benefited through the cost savings, as the efficiency-focused interventions often help to reduce fuel use, waste, and downtime. And last but not least, the society and environment will also benefit as a whole. As a significant emission sector, these green initiatives and regulations will contribute tangible results in lowering the global emissions and reduce the climate change impacts. And finally, a cleaner energy systems and industrial processes will also lead to a healthier communities and an improved ecosystems for our future generations. In conclusion, this video is intended to address Yinson's growing need to take Scope 3 emissions into account by understanding their value chains from a systemic perspective. thereby unlocking opportunities for improved operations and foster collaborative efforts with its clients. The above-mentioned sustainability concept of lean management, Kanban technologies, and the continuous client engagements are the most practical strategy that can be employed in current Yinson scenario to ultimately to reduce and mitigate the scope 3 emissions. And with this, we have come to the end of this video. Thank you for your time and attentions.